May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. In today's passage, we encounter the prickly theme of chosenness. Does God have favorites? Depending on how we answer this question, we may make our distinctive belief about God too relative, or worse, we may head into the dangerous ground of religious fundamentalism, even fanaticism. Either way, we are in danger of missing the point of God's loving nature. This is what is happening in the world as we see in the news and on the social media the horrific results of extremist religious fundamentalism in northern Iraq. It is what lies at the very core of the conflict between Palestine and Israel, and many other conflicts that have been overshadowed by these two. The question is there really a chosen nation? Is there really a chosen people of God? If God is the creator of us all, how can this be? These are not easy questions to be confronted with. They're not easy questions to even begin answering. Not when we know what terrible acts have been and continue to be perpetrated by those who believe that God is on their side. This is true of Christians, it is true of Muslims, it is true of Jews, or any other religion you can think of. In the extraordinary gospel story we read this morning, we encounter a side of Jesus that offends our modern sensibilities and certainly our political correctness. The words Jesus uses to argue with the Canaanite woman are not ones we generally expect to hear Jesus saying. So what is going on? How do we understand what Jesus is trying to say, or what the evangelists are trying to communicate about Jesus? Let's take a look at the story and its setting as the evangelist describes it in the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus has been teaching and walking across the country, followed by large crowds. He heals the sick, forgives sins, and challenges the established thinking of God. To everyone who thinks that God is satisfied with external piety, he brings the enormous challenge of his spirit and his personal knowledge. God looks into the heart. God is not pleased with mere observances. God requires a new way of thinking, of praying, and a new way of being. And now, tired and needing to escape the crowds, Jesus moves north out of Israel into what we know as Lebanon, the ancient cities of Tyre and Sidon. In the Gospel of Mark, the evangelist tells us that Jesus entered a home, probably belonging to friends, and asked them to keep his visit secret. In the Gospel of Matthew, we see him entering the region, probably followed only by his disciples, and immediately a woman accosts him, not with a polite request, but with shouting and insistent begging. If Jesus wanted anonymity there, it seems his plans were thwarted because his reputation had preceded him. There are many admirable characteristics of this Canaanite woman, qualities that we might identify in the heroines of our own country who helped to bring about change and whom we celebrated and commemorated last Saturday in what was sadly become a glorified South African Mother's Day. This Canaanite woman must have heard about Jesus even before he came to town, because she is ready. As I've already said, Jesus' reputation preceded him, and she believed what she had heard about him. She's not a Jew, and yet she is using language that is familiar only to Jews of the time. She addresses Jesus as Son of David. She's absolutely certain that Jesus is who he says he is. Unlike his own people who doubt him, try to catch him out by questioning his integrity in every conversation, this Canaanite woman takes it as a given that he alone has the power to heal her daughter. Like any mother, because she loves her daughter, she will beg, she will ask, even shout, until his power gives her what she wants, the healing of her child. In her pleading, her shouting, She asks first for mercy and then for healing. Apparently, Jesus keeps on walking, but she follows. She doesn't give up. Jesus remains silent. Even his disciples, embarrassed by her shouting, ask him to respond, to send her away. I find it strange, maybe it's an important factor in this passage, but strange how often the disciples want Jesus to send people away. When he was feeding the 5,000, in that story 2 weeks ago, they ask him to send them away to go and find food because they don't have enough resources. In another story where parents are bringing their children to him, they try and shoo the children away. And Jesus says, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." The disciples are certain that because this Canaanite woman is not a Jew, she doesn't have the right to ask him for anything. Now Jesus says something not to her or to the disciples in Matthew chapter 15 verse 24, but in something like an aside in a stage play. I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Dear friends, this is his mission as he has known it up to this point. And he has worked at it every moment of his ministry. He has worked to bring his people back to God. The woman hears his words, but she is the kind who is not deterred by national or even religious differences. She will not let him stop her from seeking help. And now Jesus uses language that separates those who think they are God's chosen from those whom they consider outside God's grace. The Israelites are the children. The outsiders, the Gentiles, are referred to as dogs. In our age and our culture, this is heavy language. We don't exactly know what it meant at that time and in that context, but we know that it was certainly not complimentary. The bread, that is the essence of life, and that essence of life must be given to the children. The mother, the Canaanite woman, however, does not budge. In words that are vaguely reminiscent of the prayer of humble access we say every week before, or most weeks before the communion, we hear her response, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." This poor outsider understands that God's mercy is so great that even the tiny bit, the scraps that escape from the chosen ones, is enough for healing and for doing good. This is what faith means. This Canaanite woman knows who Jesus is, and she knows that only he can heal her daughter. The rest doesn't matter. She is a supplicant. She isn't proud. She is determined. In this month of compassion, we hear yet again that Jesus, out of compassion, responds to this faith powerfully. Compassion can be defined as the deep awareness of the suffering of another, coupled with the wish to relieve it. In this brief encounter with the Canaanite woman, Jesus recognizes that his mission has expanded beyond the boundaries of his own people. A poor woman has shown him this much. He did not come just for the children of Israel. His mercy, his compassion extends to everyone. You know, it saddens me to witness that many people of faith, Christian, Muslim, and Jew alike, don't get this. Full of admiration, he responds first to her great faith and then to her wish for her daughter. "Your faith is great," he says. "Your daughter is well." This is how we all benefit from the woman's faith. An outcast, a person seen as a minor inconvenience in the eyes of the disciples of Jesus, becomes a catalyst. This is the wonder of the gospel passage today. The good news comes from unexpected places. A woman ignored, considered a nuisance, becomes an object of admiration by Jesus himself. And instead of sending her away, like we Christians so often do to those who believe don't belong, Jesus expands his mission from the limits of Judea to the rest of the world. The encounter does not happen within the land of the chosen, but outside it, in the Gentile region of Tyre and Sidon. Once again, God brings good out of what was generally assumed to be evil. The dogs are received in the same way the children are. They now eat from the same table, and not just the scraps that happen to fall from the table. We owe this woman a great deal. And the prophecy of Isaiah chapter 56, the first lesson for this morning, concerning foreigners is fulfilled. They too can minister to the Lord. Dear friends, the incarnation is vivid in this story, as is the theology of kenosis, the self-emptying of our will to become receptive to God's will. Jesus, the one we have come to believe as the Son of God, part of God's self, learns something from an outsider, a humble woman, and from a mother's love. And his mission is broadened. Dear friends, this is a story to be honored, to be proclaimed, and to fill us with gratitude. Lord, have mercy on me, she cries, and the Lord shows mercy to the one considered an outcast. God's mercy is not reserved for a select few who believe they are God's chosen people. No. God's mercy is made available to all, children and dogs alike. Amen.